Hello, my name's Jared Carter. Welcome to my video. This is a pre-recording of the workshop I'll be presenting at the 2014 Design and Technology Teachers Association of Victoria's conference. The title of my workshop is Photoshop in CAD, How to Effectively Produce Presentation Drawings. This mainly affects the subject product design and technology at a VCE level, but the skills learned here could probably be used across a number of subjects. I've chosen Photoshop for this workshop, but realistically, the skills are pretty basic and could be used across a number of graphic editing software, or even more simpler programs such as PowerPoint, Keynote, even something as basic as Microsoft Word. So I guess one of the questions is why ICTs in product design technology. First, let's review some of the curriculum goals, and I'll just quickly go through this. So VCE Product Design Technology Unit 2, Outcome 1, and Unit 3, Outcome 3 of Key Knowledge. Both reference ICTs in a design stage and as appropriate, and I think that's critical to remember. We don't want our students to be moving away from those hand sketching skills, very important. But if appropriate, can we implement ICTs? And Photoshop and CAD is certainly the way to do that. And just looking forward a few years to the draft Australian curriculum for design technologies, specific software and digital hardware to assist them to realise their design ideas. So again, some links to ICTs and the design process there. So that's a curriculum angle. The other perspective, which I think is very important, is an industry perspective. And myself, coming from industry before I became a teacher, this is very important to me to be able to generate authentic learning experiences in my classroom that reflect what's happening in industry. So just as an example, this is a design we probably all know. It's the Barcelona chair from the Bauhaus in 1929, designed by, I hope I pronounced this correctly, Ludwig Mies van der Rohe. And on the left there, we have an example of the original sketch that he would have done in the Bauhaus in Germany in the 1920s. That's great, but how do presentations look today? Well, I've just by going on Pinterest, I've just found some examples. So here we have a modern day example of some headphones. So going away from that earlier example, we already have color annotations, which is important, and some background highlights, some additional information down there. Another simple example I found just on Pinterest was this one on the backpack, which I quite liked. I thought this was a great example of a presentation drawing. We have the final product there, but we have some additional information over here. Again, annotations. And another example here. I like the sketches in the background, but looking at these images here, you can see an influence of ICTs. And finally, this one, which we may know from just this year's Top Designs exhibition. So you'd have to admit all these four presentation drawings are quite different. But one thing they do have in common, away from the presentation drawing from the Bauhaus, was the use of ICTs. Without knowing how exactly these were created, I think I can assume that we have some layering here on Photoshop where these drawings were being done offline, some color added in the background. Again, I think we can assume that this background here was created in Photoshop or a similar program, and I'd suggest the colouring in here as well. Why I chose this drawing is because I'm quite confident to say that this here is generated from CAD and just brought in. But again, going back, we don't want to lose those sketching skills, and why I've chosen this concept is the designer has chosen to bring in his sketches in the background as well, which I think is a great effect and show that evolution of design. But again, that would have had to been scanned, so we're talking ICTs again. And the reason I chose this one from this year's Top Design exhibition was, if anyone has seen this in the exhibition, they'll know that this student quite well used a template. So this little feature up here was on every single page, and this was the same as well, just with different numbers and that. So being very efficient, which is important in design, um, and all their sketches as well. I won't. I don't assume that this was all done on a single page. I would imagine they were scanned in and brought in together into a program like Photoshop, um, in order to bunch it together and get a good presentation design. So, in order to demonstrate how to effectively produce presentation drawings in design and technology, I beg perhaps the impossible question: how would have Ludwig presented the Barcelona chair if he was studying Year 12 today? And this is what I'll be explaining in my tutorial. So we have one example here, which I have created. Um, and you'll see familiar concepts here. We've got obviously the presentation, the image of the chair, which I've brought in from CAD, from SketchUp. I've got use of effective annotations. I've reused that original sketch to highlight some of the skills that Ludwig would have had. And then just using some basic graphic design techniques, I've got the number of the concept here, a similar little paint effect in the background that you would have seen in the top design example. I've got a logo in the corner just to balance out the presentation, and then my student number, or Ludwig's student number, down the bottom. So that's perhaps one way that he would have presented, and I'll be showing that today. Another way, just going back to that backpack concept presentation drawing that I've shown. So rather than having the rectangle in the background, I've just got a full gradient like that. I've got, again, additional information which I've brought in from CAD, some side view, but dimensions, again, adding detailed information, that paintbrush effect again. So that's what I'll be demonstrating over the next few minutes. Okay, so the first step to create these presentation drawings is obviously to export the images from whatever CAD software that you'll be using, and that might be something like SketchUp, which is the example on the screen now, or you might be using something like Autodesk Inventor. The critical thing to do is when you're exporting an image is to make sure you have the right resolution and the right file setting. So before we start, let's just get our chair onto the right angle. So I'm happy with that angle there. We obviously don't want it in wireframe. We want to highlight some of those details. So just going to the face style, I'll change this to shaded. Yep, that's looking pretty good. I'm happy with that angle. So now in SketchUp, you'd just go File, Export, 2D Graphic. Now, going back to file type, we want, there's some options here, there's JPEG, TIFF, but we want PNG. And the reason for that is if we go to options for the transparent background, that will be critical when we go into Photoshop. We just want the chair, we don't want the grey background or the lines from the datum planes or anything like that. So please always use transparent background as a PNG file, and 72 pixels per inch. I probably want a bit higher than that, so I might go 150, you might go up to 300, but make sure it's something of reasonable quality so you get a good image. Make sure you name that something that you will remember, and export. Okay, now that we've created the base image, we're going to switch over to Photoshop, and the first thing we need to do is create a new file. So Again, the settings that you get are important at the start, and we want to have an A3 page just because that's a common size that we can print. Now, just as a warning, Adobe hide this under international paper. Yep, great. So I've got A3 selected there. That's what we want. And again, have a look at your resolution. Make sure it's something high enough, and 300 pixels per inch. I'm happy with that. Great. So I'm going to click OK. Okay, so now that we have our blank canvas in Photoshop, the first thing I'm going to do is recreate that background that we had here. So that, and it's a gradient background. It's starting at a darker grey and slowly fading to a light of to a white almost. So over here on the right, we have the layer tree, and if you're not familiar with layers, and if you're not that familiar with Photoshop, I would encourage anyone to just look up a tutorial online on layers, because it's really the first step in Photoshop, and it's a great way to control your drawing. And what it allows us to do, there's some different layers here that I've brought in to help this presentation. It allows us to stack different images on top of each other and experiment with different layers, and we can even turn some on and off. It's a great way to start. So we want to do that background image, and the first thing I want to do is to create a new layer for that background. So I'm going to go up here to the top to the layer icon, and then I'm going to select new layer, and I'm going to call that, always name your layers, I'm going to call that background gradient. And the reason we name it is the same reason we name all our computer files. It just makes it easier to find later on. So there we go, and then you can see that my background gradient layer is now in the layer tree, but obviously it's empty. To do that gradient, I'm going to select this icon here, which is the gradient tool, so that's selected. And this is my color palette down here. Now you can see the gradient it wants to give me up here on the preview. I want to do that grey, so I'm going to select the color palette, and probably that color there looks appropriate. And once that's done, just check that I've got, yep, so I'm going from grey to white, and then I'm just going to drag my gradient tool down like that, and voila, there it is. So in a matter of seconds, I've already created. Okay, so now that we have our background image, it's now time to bring in the image that we generated from SketchUp of the Barcelona chair. Now, there's many different ways that we can import an image into a Photoshop file, but I'll show you the way I find just the most easiest. So let's go to File, Open. Let's find our image. I think it was that one there, and then we can hit Open. Okay, so now we have the image open, and you will see up the top here that the Barcelona chair file is selected on the tabs. We can move back to the previous image that we're working on. And here's several other files that I had. So you'll recognize this tab sort of format. It's just like an internet browser when you have several pages open, and it's just a really good way to be able to manage your files as you're working on them. Okay, let's bring this image into the main presentation drawing. So I'm going to select what we call the marquee tool, rectangular marquee, and then I'm just going to take that, drag that right over the image. You notice the background has these grey and white squares. That just means that the image is transparent, and that's what we wanted. And just to demonstrate that, let's go to copy, and using the tab system, go back to our original image file, and we're going to hit paste, and there's our chair. And as you can see, none of that background. Now, let's go back to the layer tree while we can, so we can see my original background layer there, and now I've got this new layer here. When you do this, let's rename it now. So I'm going to call that Barcelona chair, and then just ISO for isometric. Great. So I'm going to use this cursor here to help move our image into the correct place. And is that a bit big? Probably. So let's transform that size. So going to Edit, Free Transform. This is a handy tool to resize and even rotate images, and we can drag this handle to change the size, but I recommend that your finger be on shift at the same time, and that will just scale it. They'll just resize it within the original scale. So that's about what we want. So I'm going to hit enter or return. Using the moving tool, I'm just going to move that to about there, and that's about what we want for our presentation drawing. Just one final thing before we move on to the next step. We can add little bits and pieces to our images through layer styles, and all these things here are different kind of options we can do to adjust our image. I'm going to choose drop shadow just to add a bit of a 3D effect to our drawing. So just change the angle and maybe the distance. How's that? Bit more. It's just sort of, yep, looking good. That shadow is probably a bit dark for me, so I'm going to change the opacity, which, as it suggests, will make it a little bit more transparent. So there we go. So from selecting layer styles, drop shadow, I'm just able to add a bit of a 3D effect to that image. Okay, now that we have our image, the next step I'm going to talk about is annotations. Annotations is obviously a critical component of VCE Product Design Technology. So what kind of annotations do we want? I'll just flick to a section of the rubric. I've just copied the bit for very high, and what we have here is comprehensive annotations to explain the relevance of research and developmental work to the needs of the client or end user. So that's what I want my annotations to reflect. So the way we add in text is simply just select the text icon over here, and then I'm going to draw out where I want the text to go. And then straight away we have our text box there. Up here you'll see some different fonts and text size. We've seen all this before in other programs. So relevant annotations. Well, this chair was designed for the Spanish royal family in the 1920s, and that cushion's in black leather. So I'm going to write black leather cushion to explain what it is, and then Y to reflect royal prestige. And there we go. So for me, I think that's a pretty effective annotation. Again, using this moving icon up here, if we're not happy where it is, we can move it. If we want to change that text, go back to your text icon, you can click in it, you can select it. Skills we're very familiar with from other programs like Word or PowerPoint. So I'm happy with that. Now, we're going to add in some other annotations as well, but I've done these earlier. So remember before we talked about being able to turn off layers, etc. So I imported some annotations already, and I'm just turning them on with this little icon there. So, and there we have what I feel are some really relevant annotations to this design. So I'm talking about the materials used. I'm talking about some philosophies that the Bauhaus used, such as being able to design things for mass production. I'm talking about some of the influences, so which explains this annotation here. So that's how we can create annotations in PowerPoint. Okay, so remembering back to our original presentation drawing that we're trying to create, I had this logo in the corner here, and I just did that to balance out the sheet. A student might choose to do anything like a page number or their own logo or something relevant to the presentation drawing. This is quite simple to bring in. I've already opened up my logo there, or the association's logo, and again, just repeating what I did before. I'm going to use the rectangle marquee to drag right across that image. This has a transparent background, obviously. I'm going to go copy, and moving along the tabs, select the original image, and I'm going to paste that in. I don't want it there, so again, use your moving icon up into the corner, And of course, we always rename our layers. Now that the logo is in, I'll just go back to the original presentation. Now that the logo is in, I want to add this little feature here in the corner. And the student would be able to use this for several concepts. They could use this whole template that we're making now, and this one's obviously concept 1, and you could have 2, 3, 4, etc. So to create that, I've already shown how to create text. So I've created it already, so that layer is now turned on. And what we're trying to do now is create this little paintbrush effect. And you'll remember from the top design example that I showed of that paintbrush effect. So how can we do that in Photoshop? So I've shown you gradient tool. I'm now going to show you the paintbrush tool, which is just there. So select your paintbrush tool, and up here we have a lot of different paint brushes, I guess we would call them. And I want the one that is round, blunt, medium, stiff. It's called here. So that's a certain kind of style, and I've put it to a size of 90. Okay. Now, again, going back to our layer tree, we don't want to draw on that layer. We want this to be on its own layer. So I'm going to go layer, new layer, and I'm going to just simply call that paintbrush, and there we go. At the moment, black is selected from our palette. We probably want white, and then I can just simply draw in my effect. Now, obviously, that's going in front of our text, which we don't want. So go back to your layer tree down here, and it's just a matter of selecting it and moving it down. And we can even move that if we want. So there we go. Great effect to bring in that paintbrush style without ever having to leave Photoshop. So another good effect there that students can use. Okay, so now that that's in, let's just going back to our original image. Let's bring in the side view so we can add this detail here. Going back to, now we have to go back to SketchUp, obviously, because we're going to import that in. Now, before we needed the shaded view, but we don't want that this time. We want more of a wireframe view. So I'm going to select hidden line, actually. So there we go. So now we can just export the line data. We want to get on the right angle. So go to the camera. And I believe it's front. Yep. And you can see that this is still in perspective, which we probably don't want. So again, go back to your camera and see how perspective is selected. We want parallel projection. Great. So now that the image is ready, we're going to export that the same way we did before. So export 2D graphic. PNG is already selected. Transparent background's already selected. I'm going to increase the pixels, and I'm going to call this Barcelona chair side view, and I'm just replacing a file that I've already created. Going back to Photoshop, open up the exported image. So there's our side view. There we go. So that's what we exported. Again, use your marquee tool, copy, back to our presentation drawing, and we want to paste. So there's our side view there. Let's rename the layer side view. Now that's probably a bit small for what we wanted. So again, go back to your free transform feature from the edit menu. Drag that out with your finger on the shift key, and that's looking about right. Now, remember the original image had these more coloured in white. So go back to Photoshop, and I'm going to teach you the paint bucket tool. Now, a lot of students always can't find the paint bucket tool. You got to hold on gradient and wait for this little flyer to come out, and then select paint bucket. Make sure you got the right color selected. Yep. Now I'm just going to zoom in here. So there's your magnifying glass. Yep. And we can just make sure you select inside the black lines, and it will just select anything within that color range. There we go. Now, just as a warning, if I was to select the edge, you'll see that the whole lot will go white, which we don't want. So make sure that you are only within the color range. All right, so just zooming out, are we happy with that? Yep, that's looking pretty good. Okay, now to add in the dimension with the measurement. So first of all, we're going to select a new layer. So new layer, call this dimension. Great. Select. This is the line tool. This is on 5 points. I'm pretty happy with that. And make sure that you got arrowhead selected for start and end. And I'm just going to drag with my finger on the shift key. I'm just going to drag that out the length. Great. Now to add in the dimension, again, just using the text tool. We've done this before, and that was 750 millimeters long. Move that to the correct position. Okay, great. So there's my 2 new layers there. It's going to do something a bit different now. I'm going to select them both. So finger on the shift key and select both. Go back to your layer menu and group layers. So that just puts it into a little subfolder. And if I was to pan that out, you can see those 2 original layers. The reason I want to do that is because I'm going to quickly create this second one here just by simple duplication. So right click on the group and go duplicate group. And there we go there. So if I was to use the move tool, you can see I've now got 2. It's not on the right angle. So go back to your edit and remember our free transform tool, one of the best tools you'll ever get. And just using the rotate, great. Hit return. And you can see I've quickly just was able to add in that second dimension. So a really efficient tool there. I've already brought in the front view. So that's it there. Oops. And I'm just going, again, use your transform tool to get them the same size. Free transform, finger on the shift key. Yep, need a dimension for this one. So again, I'll duplicate the group. Oops, wrong one. So I want the original one. Duplicate group. And there we go. So pretty simple way to get in that side and front view with dimensions. Okay, zooming out, now we can see the final product. I have my original image, I have effective annotations, and I have the additional information of the side and front view with dimensions and a few nice things just to pad it out with the concept name, a logo, and my student number down the bottom. For more advanced users, I'll now show you how to create a concept similar to this. And the reason it's very similar, it's got all the same features, but the reason I like this concept is because it's still utilizing those original sketches that the student may be creating. And we don't want to lose that data, especially if they've done some really good work. So how can we import our data similar to this effect here, or it might be similar to the top design one, or this concept here with just still using that data that we created at the start. So going back to Photoshop, I've got one which already has all those features that I've already shown you how to use. Now, first step I want to do is just to create this background rectangle, which is just a nice little way to lift your page off the screen. So I'm going to need a new layer again. So we know how to do this. I'm just going to go layer, new layer. I'll call that gradient background just so I remember what it was. And going back, we're going to use our marquee tool. So in the previous concept, we did a gradient for the entire background. This time I just want to limit that gradient to this marquee here. Now I don't want it black, so I'm going to select probably that grey there. I'm going to select the gradient tool. So hold the paint bucket down and select gradient and grey to white. Yeah, I'm happy with that. And just use the mouse to put in our gradient. Excellent. Now, what this is missing is from the original concept is this black outline. We can do this through a feature called stroke. And that's in layer style. So go back to your layer styles and you want to select stroke. What's called stroke, I'm not sure. And you can already see it's brought in this black line. I think that's a bit thin. That's on 3 pixels. I'm going to take that up to about, probably a bit much. Yeah, about 9 is looking good. And I also want to give this gradient a drop shadow, just to lift it off the page and give that 3D effect. So selecting drop shadow down the bottom, I'm happy with that angle. Not happy with that distance, so I'm just going to bring it out. Yeah, again, a bit dark. So I'm just going to move the opacity down. Great. So from a few seconds, I've already got that background gradient with a stroke and shadow completed. Now we want to bring in the sketch. So we would have scanned that from our original hand drawing, and I've already opened it here. So the student can bring this in, and then it's just a matter of copying that, going back to our original image and pasting it in. So let's move that out. There's a couple of things that are wrong with it straight away. First, it's probably too small. So again, free transform. It's probably getting to the right shape. But as with all scans, we're going to get the page color in the background, regardless if it's yellow like this one here or probably white as your students will use. So select this. This is the select feature, and there's a tool in here called color range, and that will let us select just one color of a layer. So just selecting there, this has a tolerance of 68. So yeah, we probably want something pretty high. Play around with that, and if I select that, we can see the preview there. And you can tell straight away it's selected all that color. And then we can just simply hit delete. Beautiful. So it's looking a bit rough, but let's just move that in. And going back, what did we do on the original one? It was probably on more of an angle. So again, I'll go back to free transform. Just going to rotate that a bit. Probably looking about right. Maybe a bit bigger. Yep. Great. And I also, in the original one, had faded it in a bit. And we can do that through opacity. So actually, first, let's rename the layer. And in the layer tree, if you select your layer, up here you'll see a feature called opacity, which we've seen in a few of the tools today. Move that down to about 50%. Yeah, maybe a bit less, maybe about 45. There we go. Now that's looking a lot better already. It still allows us to focus on the image to the left, which we probably want to do, but it puts that in the background as a nice little feature. Now, we need to be able to limit this just to that rectangle. As you can see, I've done there. I've deleted it back. So going back to Photoshop, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the magic wand tool. This is the magic wand tool here. And like color range, it will select just whatever color you select that on. Now, I don't want to select these parts. What I want to do is I want to change to the gradient layer, which is one below. And I'm not going to select the gradient either. What I'm going to do is I'm going to select just the empty space outside the gradient. And you can see what I've done is I've selected all that white space there. Now going back to my sketch layer, you can see that that selection is still there. I can just hit delete. Great. Now go back up to select and hit deselect. And there we go. We've been able to bring in our sketch quite quickly and with a few features, tidy it up so it looks good enough for the presentation drawing. Okay, so now we've finished both of the two different styles of presentation drawings I created for the Barcelona chair. And you may be thinking these skills might be too much to learn before your folio is due, or perhaps your school doesn't have access to Photoshop. But as I've said previously, the basic presentation techniques that I've shown here can be carried across to some very simple programs. And to conclude this presentation, I'll quickly show how I can bring in a presentation similar to this into Photoshop. So I'll do this really quickly. First of all, create a page and make sure your page is the right size. So often PowerPoint will have a default slide setting, but you want a setting that your photocopier will print out nicely. So A3, I would suggest. And you want to, first of all, insert the picture of the chair. So the same picture that we exported to Photoshop, we can use that picture again. So there it is. So yeah, do we want that bigger? Again, we can resize this. So look, these are similar features that we learnt before. Now we're going to add the rectangle. So go to your shape tool. We can just draw out that rectangle like that. It's not the color that we want, so format the shape. We want a black stroke around it. Make sure it's a good thickness. We want a shadow, so bring that shadow out a bit. Yep, great. And we want a gradient, so go to fill. Color was that grey color that we were using, and gradient, and we probably want, let's have a look at that. So hit OK, and there we go. So obviously that's in the wrong order, so you can reorder this. These are simple things that you've probably done before. Center back, great. And automatically in PowerPoint, we've been able to create something very similar to what we did in Photoshop. Okay, let's add our annotations. So again, very simple. Just add a text box like that. So black leather cushion. Probably want that a bit smaller. Yeah, it's looking pretty good. So again, we've quickly added annotations as well. Now to speed up this presentation, I've already got some of my previous data, so I'll just copy that in quickly because I'm sure you guys would know how to create all that. So already I've got the concept name, I've got the logo pasted in, the student number. I'll just rearrange that. Now one thing PowerPoint has that Photoshop probably doesn't is the use of being able to create a table. Now in product design technology, this is crucial because what we can do is add our concept evaluation table. So this is something that we'd all be doing at the Year 12 level, and then it's just a matter of, this looks like it's a bit big, so I'll move it up there. And I'll just move my table down a bit. Might move this to up there. And voila, I've already got a concept selection table into my design. Now, the advantage of creating presentation pages like this, be it in Photoshop, PowerPoint, or any other program, is the advantage of templating. So you can easily see that this is concept 1, but when we went to concept 2, 3, 4, etc., it would just be a matter of rechanging a number here, importing perhaps a new image and annotations, and our table is already there, so we can quickly just put in the different data um, for our evaluation table. Being efficient is one of the key principles of design in industry, and that's why I feel this presentation is important in bringing our students closer to what is reflected in industry. I hope you have enjoyed the presentation. I hope it's been useful, and I wish you the best in the future. Thank you.